Tal Kadosh Boker Or, Mishna Yomi Masechet Eduyot, Perek Vav, chapter 6, Mishnah Gimel and Dalet, Mishnah 3 and 4, page 138. Yeah, 138. Kazait Basar Aporesh Me'ever Minachai. When a person has a kazait of flesh, that's basar, that comes from Ever Minachai, from a living human being. So Rabbi Eliezer Metameh, Rabbi Eliezer says it's tameh, just like as if that he passed away. Rabbi Yoshua ben Nuchunya Metarim, Rabbi Yoshua Nuchunya, they come and they say that it's going to be tahor, just like it comes from a living person. Etzem kiseora, when you have a bone which is like a barley corn, right? A poresh me'ever minachai, which separates from a living person. So Rabbi Nuchunya Metameh, Rabbi Nuchunya comes and he says it's tameh, and Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua Metarim, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Yoshua say that it's going to be tahor, just like a bone removed from a living person. Amrulo le Rabbi Eliezer, they said to Rabbi Eliezer, Ma ra'ita letameh kezayit basar poresh me'ever minachai. What reason did you see that you're making tameh kezayit of flesh that comes from a limb from a living person? Amalem, he tells them, Matzinu ever minachai kemet shalem. He says we found from a living limb from a living person is like a complete corpse. It's like a corpse, right? It's like a dead body. Mahamet, just like the dead body. If there's a kazait that comes from it, it's going to be tameh. So to every minachai. If you have a kazait that comes from it, it's going to be tameh. Amrulo, they responded, right? They said to Rabbi Eliezer, no, it's not true. Why? In timeta kazait basar aporesh minamet. If you were mitameh, kazait basar that came from met, sheken timeta etzem kisora aporesh minu, which is also an etzem kisora mitameh. Meaning when you have mamash like a little barley grain, right, from the met, it's already mitameh. Titameh kazai basar poresh me'ever minachai shekem tiharta etzem kisora aporesh minu. When you have a small barley corn, right, of minachai, it's going to be tahor. So says the Gemara, Amrulo Nechunya, they said to Rabbi Nechunya, Maraita letameh etzem kisora aporesh minu minachai. What did you see to be mekame tameh? A bone the size of a baby corn, right, from living person. We saw the Ever Minachai is much like a dead body, just like the dead body. Etzem kisora poresh mimenu, right? Tameh. It's going to be when you have an etzem kisora, it's going to be tameh. So to Ever Minachai, etzem kisora poresh mimenu yetameh. Amrulo, they said no. If you consider a bone the size of a barley corn that comes from a corpse to be tameh, sheken matzit timeta kezai basar poresh mimenu, because you're metameh. If you have a kezait basar that separates. Are you going to come and be mitameh an etzem kiseora that comes from a living person? When you're going to be right, you're going to have kezait basar that's going to be tahor. They told Rabbi Eliezer, why are you differentiating between one another? What's going on over here? He says you're comparing the limb of a living person to a corpse, but only with regard to its flesh and not to its bones. Meaning, kilu, there's flesh and bones. So you're only comparing the living person to a corpse only to do with the flesh, but not to do with the bones. Or either you do both the same. Flesh and bones are the same thing. You have a living person, and it separates a kazait. You're making differentiation between the flesh and the bones. Why? Selam shows. Or everything is tahor, everything is tameh. He said to them, he says flesh is much more tameh than bones. Because flesh is also by a nevela and a sheretz. Sheretz is the creepy crawlers. Right, which is not the same thing by atzamot. Another explanation. When you have an ever which has a basar karaui, it's going to be mitameh. Whether it's going to be maga, masa, or ohel. Remember, maga is touching, masa is carrying, and ohel is in the same tent, right? Chaser basar tameh. It's going to be lacking. It's going to be tameh. Chaser etzem tahor. But if you're lacking the etzem, it's not a limb anymore. It's tahor. Amrulo Rabbi Nechunya. They told Nechunya, Maraita lechalek medotecha. Why are you dividing between, right, the limb of a living person to a corpse only with regard to the bones and not to the flesh, or tameh b'shneim, or tahor b'shneim? Malehem marbet tumat atzamot min tumat basar. Atzamot is worse than basar. Shabasar aporesh mina achai tahor, ve'ever aporesh mimenu v'hu kabriyata tameh. When you have flesh that separates, it's tahor. But if you have an ever, and the ever is exactly the way it was created, so tameh kabriyata ech shenivra, so it's going to be tameh. Okay. Davar acher, another explanation. Yeah, kezait basar is mitamem b'magav u'masav u'ohel. Right? Kezait basar is going to be mitamem with touching, carrying, and with ohel. V'rova atzamot, and the majority of the bones, mitamim, are going to be magav masav u'ohel. Chaser habasar tahor. If flesh is missing, it's going to be tahor. But if you're going to be chaser rova atzamot, right? If the majority of the bones are missing, afal pi shetomel mitamem be'ohel mitamem b'magav, even though it's going to be tahor, that it's not going to be mitamem be'ohel because the majority of the bones are missing. But still, it's mitamem b'magav masav. Tavar acher, another explanation also, a third way, which bones are greater, right? Meaning, basically, what we're trying to find out is we're trying to find different logics. The bones is worse than the flesh. Okay, because at the beginning he wanted to say the opposite. The flesh is worse than bones. So he says, Kol basar amet shu pachom mikazait tahor. The flesh of an entire corpse that is less than a kazait is tahor. Rov binyano, if it's the majority of the structure, verov minyano shel met, or the majority of the minyan of the met, it's going to be tameh. So they went and they said like this. Amru lo Rabbi Yoshua, they told Rabbi Yoshua, right? That means Rabbi Eliezer and Mechunya said to Rabbi Yoshua, Mar ra'ita letar b'shneim, why are you permitting both of them? Amar lahem, he told them no. Im amarta bemet sheyesh bo rov verova v'rakav, right? This is because there's stringencies, right, to do with the flesh and the bones. He says like this. He says the majority of the bones, a quarter cover the bones, and even corpse dust, right? He's going to say Tomru bechai she'embo, right? Rov v'kav, right? V'rakav. He says, well, you're going to say that by the living person that it doesn't have the same thing, whether it's the majority of the bones, a quarter of the kav, the corpse, and the oil. You don't have these things. So because of that, that's what we're going to come and say that it's a different halacha. So that was Mishnah Gimel. Now we're going to start Perek Dalid, Mishnah Aleph. Okay, Heid Rabbi Yoshua Rabbi Tzadok ben Al Pidyon Peter Chamor Shemet. So Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Tzadok, they testify regarding the redemption, this is the pidyon of the firstborn donkey. Okay, that basically it died before reaching the Kohen. Okay, Shembo la Kohen klum. The Kohen doesn't have anything. Right? Why? He can't demand anything. Right? So he says, Rabbi Eliezer says, Chayvim b'chriyutan b'chamesh sarim shel ben. The owner is responsible for the sheep, just as the father is responsible for the 5 coins of the son. Which means, let's say the father put the 5 coins of the Pidyon Ben, he put them, and to redeem his son, but he lost them before he gave them to the Kohen. He has to give the Kohen another 5 slain. Chachamim come and they say, En chavim b'chriyutan, ella b'pidyon shel maaser sheni, only in a pidyon of maaser sheni, which is, if it's lost, it doesn't have to be replaced. So if one redeemed his maaser sheni for money, and the money got lost before he got to Yerushalayim, he doesn't have to bring other money. So the same thing, when it's the pidyon of the sheep that it died, sorry, he doesn't have to bring another sheep. He doesn't have to bring anything else.